Hello there and welcome back to the AgostinhoZinga show with your host AgostinhoZinga, and this is episode number 528. That's 528 of the AgostinhoZinga show. How you doing? How are you feeling? Great, amazing. That's really good to know. About me, do the same old I can. One foot in front of the other, breathing in through my nose, breathing out my mouth, and trying to keep myself alive. Obviously, stuttering there doesn't necessarily help, but you get the point. You get the point. If it's your first time checking the show via YouTube, you know what to do. Smash like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment down below, leave me your thoughts, feelings, suggestions. I love to always hear them. I love to always reply, leave your heart, whatever it may be. If you're listening via the podcast app, please leave me a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 star review. I don't care which one it is, just engage, leave reviews. I've got a few on there already as it is. Let me just double check and see if I've got any new ones that I can read out, actually, because I don't mind reading them things, to be completely honest. Let's see if I can get it up on here. AgostinhoZinga show. Let's see if I can get some reviews, because so far I think I had like 14 if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if I've got any more added onto the list. Let's see, cancel. Oh, you have to open. It doesn't annoy. Anyway, you know what I mean. I've got a few on there anyway, so gratefully I do accept it. Please add those in more if you can. That'd be greatly supported. Of course, if you want to extend your support and support me via Patreon, that's also welcomed. At patreon.com/Agostinho. You'll find a link in the description of the show, as well as the description of the podcast. Whether you're listening to, just click on the Patreon link. It's only $1, the equivalent of £1 per month, and you get for that one bonus episode per week, and you also get a bonus end of month stream, which you'll get obviously at the end of this month before heading into the new year. I'll do a special patron only podcast. So thank all you guys for holding me down this entire year. Whatever you've been able to give, I'm not that bothered about it. The fact that you're willing to separate yourself from £1 or $1 that you have in your pocket that you've worked hard for, just in turn to hear me talk shit, I'm always grateful about that. So definitely we'll be doing something special at the end of the year to kind of thank you guys for that support. So definitely make sure you do that. And then that's about it really, innit? Just share and all that good stuff. Recommend it to a friend if you think they might like it. That's all I ask for. But yeah, what else has been going on with mine? Nothing much in it. Just chilling, brother. Just chilling. Enjoying life. Trying to make the best I can of the situation available. It's getting a bit bleak already. We're already in December. Halfway through, and we still don't really know what the deal is with all these restrictions going on. We don't really know where most of us stand. People that are going back to their native homes in the continent or somewhere in Europe are struggling with what to do. Should you stick or should you twist, because you don't want to leave, go see your family, and then how when you come back suddenly the rules change and you're unable to come back to your actual home where you live on the daily basis. So it's a whole hassle going on at the moment. People are stressed, people are worried. You've got all the you got all the landlords, all the pub landlords, all the bar owners, all the event-based owners sweating and stressing as well, because with all these new mandates and rules coming in, certain companies have basically cancelled their Christmas parties. And if you know anything about big corporations, or sometimes even small little companies, they usually go and hire out a space, hire out a hall, get people to come, eat dinner, whatever, drink, be merry, and then you leave, innit? But if these things are coming in place, usually they're just going to scrap it, because if anything, it's going to save them money too. So they'll be quick to scrap it. So a lot of places are scrapping the Christmas pie, which of course is negatively impacting people's ability to do catering, and just really putting everything up in the air. And we don't really have any resolution at the moment. I think the only thing we've got so far is the rules around vaccine passports. That's obviously gone through in the House of Commons. Obviously a majority of the MPs end up voting for it on both sides of the aisle, which is again a bit upsetting, because you would imagine there'd be a lot more dissenting voices. But I guess we are where we are with that sort of stuff. No point going in it too deep, but the rules are still a bit confusing. So I've kind of got up a little article about it now on the Metro, because I can't get up on the screen because the Metro's got mad crazy ad blockers on it and stuff. But essentially, this is a headline from the Metro. It says, how will they enforce this rule? Bars only have to check COVID passes after 1 a.m. Right? It's a really crazy rule that they've put in place. It doesn't really make any sense. Similar to what they were doing before, where they said, if you go to like a restaurant, you don't need to. No, if you go to a restaurant, you don't need. No, if you go to a restaurant, you need to put a mask on. But if you go to a bar, you don't need to have one on. Which is bizarre, right? For some whatever reason. But it says the following: security and staff at late night bars are going to have a tough time as soon as it hits 1 a.m. From tomorrow, venues can choose not to check for people's COVID passes until after this time, according to the government's guidance published yesterday. This suggests someone could walk in unchecked at 11 p.m, spend 2 hours shoulder to shoulder with other patrons before being asked to pass by the bouncers. So you could get in, get sloshed, and then if you don't have your pass, you could end up leaving. But by that time, you could have already done mad amount of damage if you are positive, right? That's the whole thinking behind it. Crazy. It continues, it says here, Even if they didn't have proof of vaccination or negative tests, there will have been plenty of time for them to spread coronavirus across the dance floor. The new guidance have caused a bit of a confusion at the Department of Health, says nightclubs and dance halls and discotheques are required to check COVID statuses for visitors at all times. So pubs are different, but nightclubs are different. And I think the only delineation that I've been able to see so far, if I'm not mistaken, is some weird number. There's like I think it's like 499 or 399, somewhere underneath that. If you're over the line, then obviously you get classified as a nightclub or something, and if you're under it, you can get classified as a bar or restaurant. It's a really strange, bizarre rule, to be completely honest. It continues here, it says other late night dance venues, whatever they are, must take responsible measures to ensure anyone who is present between the hours of 1 and 5 a.m, which is not a lot of places, because not a lot of places in the UK are open between those times anyway. This applies even if they've entered the premises before that time, which suggests staff would have the difficulty task of making their way through the room of drunken revelers to check their passes, which is ignoramulously done. But what they're going to do, more likely than not, because I reckon most venues are probably just going to ignore this rule, but what they're going to do, they're going to set an example, and they're going to go and bum rush one venue with loads of their flipping piggies in a flipping van. They're going to go and find some, small bar that's probably just about having their head above water, and then that's going to scare everybody else to either shut up shop or to continue checking passes. That's what's going to end up happening, because I've already seen it kind of happen already. One of the bars I love to go to in Clapton, called Blondie's, it's kind of essentially like a metal kind of punk bar, a really cool little dive bar. They decided to close just now. They've kind of announced it on their Instagram, and most of it has to come from the confusion around these passes, and also the unlikelihood that they're going to be able to be, coercing through or kind of rummaging through a group of flipping mosh pitters and stuff, people crowd surfing in this tiny little shoebox of a flipping dive bar, and able to get people's passes and stuff. And if anything, a lot of people that go there, you'd imagine, are going to be stringently, I would assume, anti-government and obviously anti-vaccination. So you can't imagine even that being a good idea in the first place. So I just don't understand it. I really don't. It just makes complete nonsense. It's just going to cause so much havoc. It continues here, says it's not quite clear what the Department of Health distinction between nightclubs and other late night venues means. It says venues have two options over when to implement the checks: either the time the venue opens or from when the rules apply at 1 a.m. So they can either start doing it when they open the doors just to make it easy, or they can do it at 1 a.m, which sounds logistically tricky to say the least. Of course it does. An example given by the government of how the new system would work also says a bar is open throughout the day and stays open later than 1 a.m. But who's not? Honestly, these people, I don't know if they've been to actual bars. Like, who's in a bar before like 6 p.m. if you're not an alcoholic, just hanging out there? Not many people. Most of the times that they get the actual big money, or they get the most money, I can imagine, through the till, is going to be sometime around the evening. So it's still a ball ache. It says here, it meets the criteria for mandatory use of the NHS COVID vaccine pass because it provides music and dance floor, serves with alcohol, and stays open later than 1 a.m. The manager is not required to check the COVID passes of anyone who leaves the venue before 1 a.m, but must take reasonable measures to ensure that everyone who remains in or enters the premises after 1 a.m. has a NHS COVID pass or other accepted evidence. As you'd expect, people who took to social media to express their confusion on the new system. Local coach Liz Harrington said the following: good to know COVID has a good sense of time. 12:59 it stays dormant, 1 a.m it springs into action. Very true. Nigel Horner said somebody actually sat at the computer screen and wrote the sentence, and that's probably some of the things to take away from this. I think in general, I've always kind of had a little bit of a delusional sense of self in terms of my abilities, and in terms of my ability to land jobs, in terms of my ability to be successful, to make money, to get famous, whatever it may be. I've had a real delusional sense of all that sort of stuff. But most of it hasn't just come from the fact that I think I'm awesome. It's also come from the fact that you look around, you see other people doing way better than you are, who aren't that much smarter than you, right? They're not that much well put together. They haven't necessarily done the education as much as you have, yet they're striving. So it's not my fault that I kind of believe in myself. And I look at people who have supposedly gone to some of the best schools in the country, best universities, private school led, have always had a quote unquote silver spoon in their mouth, and this is the sort of this is the way that they think they're going to deal adequately with this new strain of COVID that's out there at the moment, that's supposedly meant to be mild, supposedly meant to be serious, conflicting information going around it. But all these years, especially the last 2 years supposedly, right, of time that we've had, evidence we've had to gather, experience, this is the best option that they have to deal with COVID. in nightlife situations. This is the best option they have. Of course, it's better than them closing them. Don't get me wrong. It's better than them, shuttering them for long periods of time and people can't work or people can't have a place to go and have a bit of a release valve. Yeah, sure. But surely there has to be a better option than this. Surely there's a better option. Surely there has to be, because this is so dumb. The height of dumb. Which is why, again, I believe myself so much when it comes to the stuff that I do. And I think you should do the same. It comes here, another bewildered Brit wrote, nice to know that the virus has such an amazing timekeeping skills. It only infects people after 1 a.m. What a clever virus. But Kate Nicholas, the CEO of hospitality, interpreted the rules as applying to any venues with a dance floor that serve alcohol after 1 a.m. irrespective of size and time of the event. And again, I recommend if you're from the UK and you want to keep abreast of what's going on in terms of nightlife, in terms of COVID and all that sort of stuff, I definitely recommend you check out this guy called Adam Brooks, who's got a pub, I think, somewhere in Wanstead or something like that. He owns a pub and he's really cool in terms of following him in terms of his insights, being a pub landlord and an event book and all that sort of stuff. Of course, Sasha Lord, the guy in Manchester who's basically the nighttime advisor. He's like a way better version of our, what's her name, Amy Lammy, whatever, right? Amy Lammy is a flipping donut, but at least Sasha Lord actually knows what he's doing. And then thirdly, you got Kate Nichols, who's the CEO of the hospitality UK in the UK. Of course, she's definitely a great follower in that regard. But yeah, it's a whole lot of confusion. No one really knows what's going on. Another thing as well that makes this even more of a weird situation is that supposedly I've read articles recently that COVID passes now, in order to have a COVID pass that's actually valid, you might need to have a booster. So later on down the line, they might say the actual way to kind of prove you're fully covered is to have a booster. Unless you have one, you're not going to be fully covered, which is annoying because they already told you double jab will be enough, and now suddenly they change the rules again. So you're led to believe that every time a new variant comes out, we're going to have to get another booster, and that's going to then void whatever pass we had previously. It's just a complete horror show of a situation. It really, really is. And then I stumbled across this article from ITV talking to a couple of nightclub owners in terms of how unfairly targeted they feel regarding the whole COVID passes and what's going on and how it's negatively affecting them, because obviously it's going to discourage people from coming to the bars and pubs because they feel it's going to be unsafe, which again leads them to not be able to make money. They're not taking money for the till, which of course makes them have to shut, and everyone gets impacted, right? Bartenders, bar backs, cloakroom people that work in the toilets, the artists, everyone gets impacted, security guards, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, the article says as follows from ITV. It says nightclub owners in South Yorkshire say they feel they're being unfairly targeted as part of measures coming into force to curb the spread of Omicron variant. From tomorrow, Wednesday the 15th of December, anyone going to a nightclub will have to show that they are double jabbed or provide a negative lateral test. Paul Kinsey, owner of the Viper Rooms in Sheffield, they always have these kind of weird rooms in Northern England, don't they? Why do they call their clubs this sort of stuff? The Viper Rooms, I love that. He racked up £1 million of debt when his chain of pubs was closed in March last year and had to lay off more than 200 staff. He expects the new rules to hit his bottom line again. He says, you will have a number of people who believe, well, if this is what the government's putting in there, it must be a good reason why it's being put in there. And there'll also be people who aren't being vaccinated who will say, well, actually, we'll just stay away then. And then we'll get to the 85% of the venues and city centre that you're allowed to go to without showing any proof. Definitely agree with that one. My personal view is that Boris Johnson has lost all credibility, and I think that what happens now is the cherry picks the elements of the science to support the political decisions. We've been the whipping boy for the last 2 years in the whole COVID campaign, and I don't think the public have the respect to believe that they are saying it's actual solution. Of course not. Nightlife venues or bars and hospitality venues were the first to close during COVID because supposedly those were the places where COVID spread the most, when all the evidence that got presented to us said the complete contrary. Because if you think about it, most of these places, especially if they serve food, would have pretty decent ventilation systems anyway, would probably have good hygiene systems in the first place, or hygiene protocols. So all the things I put into place would already make them a great spot to basically be able to maneuver and to kind of work within this kind of changing landscape. But instead, they just do the kind of easy thing, which is the low hanging fruit, take the place where everyone feels nervous about because it's the most people that all compact into them and say that's not safe. But then you can go to a supermarket and buy whatever you want and spend whatever you want, however long you want in there, just as long as when you get to the tills, you stand 2 minutes away from the closest person next to you. It's a bullshit. It's a nonsense. But again, they don't know what to do. And again, at the beginning, I have more patience for it. I have more patience for it in the beginning because we were all scared. We didn't have any information. We saw all those terrifying videos coming out from places in China, early parts of Italy, people being carried out in body bags and stuff, you know, not enough room in the morgues and stuff to cremate people, like crazy videos we were seeing all over the country, all over the world, sorry. So I'm not surprised people were really panicking and not really sure what to do and kind of just, you know, everything looked like a nail at that point. I understand, hammering away. But now we have the experience, now we have the information, now we have the data, now we have the loads and bits and pieces of anecdotal evidence, we have the research, the scientific, so whatever it may be, all these alternative medicines in place. Surely there has to be a better way of dealing with this than what they're doing now, surely. But it's not. Instead, just more control, more authority, more telling you what to do, where to stand, high to jump. It's just an absolute nonsense. It really is. And continues here, says hospitality industry has been impacted by workers staying at home, and tomorrow's new rules come in just as they're entering their busiest time of the year. Imagine, true, this is probably when you make the most tips. Like, it just must be horrible any time to be in, especially if you just got back into the industry, right, and with the understanding that you're going to have maybe a good Christmas for once in the last 2 years, and then suddenly again they pull the rug underneath from your feet. It continues here, it says Nick Somernet from Unite said that it's been a particularly challenging with the distinct lack of income. He said the promise of all is going to come good at Christmas. Don't worry, we'll reap the rewards of the good, solid, safe Christmas, and we'll be happy to pay our bills in January. That's looking less likely now. The new rules will apply for nightclubs or any venue that from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. serve alcohol during those times and provide music and have a space for dancing. It will also apply for indoor seated venues with more than 500 people. Again, weird rule. Unseated indoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any event with more than 10,000 people. The government said the measures being brought in were balanced and in a proportionate. Of course, they'll say that. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab said that we've had to introduce some targeted measures to stop the stem of the flow and the spread of this Omicron variant. Same old bullshit. Again, the virus is meant to be mild. The symptoms are meant to be mild. It's not as brutal as some of the other variants that came about, but again, it doesn't matter. New variant, everyone panics, everyone scares, and then the government takes this opportunity to kind of, you know, vice grip us again in some weird overreaches and governmental control. It's just bullshit, really. It really is, man. I'm just tired of it. I'm just over it. And they've just beat us into. The only thing I can think of as a positive from this is that I think slowly but surely we've all kind of waking up to the fact that these guys don't know what they're doing. There's obviously some weird kind of overarching control thing that they just don't want to let go of, most governments, most politicians, because essentially they've kind of seen themselves in the limelight. It's sort of like what's going on with the other guy, what's his name? Dr. Fauci in America, right? He can't, you know, there's not a camera that he sees where he's not going to turn down. Every opportunity to talk to somebody, to get his voice heard in front of people, he will take it. He was somebody no one cared about for a long period of time, and then suddenly everyone cares about him and is resting, basically hanging on his every word. So I'm not surprised people like that, especially of that age, are feeling like, you know, a little bit special in the limelight. I get it. But then when it comes to the politicians and stuff who are basically don't want to let go of us and don't want to let us kind of go back to living our normal lives without their flipping control, without their intrusion, it's just getting a little bit tired now. And again, like I said, the only thing that's good from this is that people have finally woken up to the fact that this is going on a bit too much. They've kind of overstepped the mark. They're not letting go, of course, and clearly there's something else going on as to why we are still constantly in this kind of Groundhog's Day of like COVID. Yeah, it's never stopping, right? Every time we're just about to get out of it, every time things are starting to look good and we've kind of going back to having our own autonomy in our lives, suddenly a mysterious variant pops up out of the place, and then we have to go back into some level of restriction or lockdown. It's just, you know, it's too obvious now. So people have maybe woken up to the fact, and obviously as well, there's a population of people in this country for whatever reason who think Tories can do no wrong. I think for them that's been a big wake up call. But again, for the other side too, for the ones that also think Labour can do no wrong, they've not been the best opposition either, right? Keir Starmer, despite all these kind of blufferings and boasting on TV, every kind of restriction and every kind of measure they've put into place in terms of restrictions, he's kind of basically agreed with every single one. I don't think there's one restriction so far that's been brought to the House of Commons that he's not endorsed or not kind of got behind, all under the guise of, we're trying to stem the flow. This the normal line they always kind of try out here, right? It's this line. I think it's here. To stem the flow and spread of this new Omicron variant. It's like this line, they spread it. It's like fucking, I hear this fucking being sung all over the place to stop this and replace Omicron with everything else, with some other variant come out next year, and then next year, and then next year, and then next year. It's just like, ay, leave me the fuck alone. But they won't. They just won't. They refuse to leave you alone. You know, the COVID passports are probably going to have a really bad impact on nightclubs, I can imagine. Here's another article courtesy of the BBC speaking about it. It says the following: nightclubs warn COVID passports will have devastating effect, which I'm sure it will, which probably will lead to, again, more illegal parties, more underground parties, which again will then lead to more cases, supposedly, more deaths, supposedly. It's just like, they always make a rod for their own back here. It says the Nighttime Industries Association said it had come at the worst possible time, with the pre-Christmas period absolutely crucial for the sector. The rules affect indoor venues holding more than 500 people and outdoor venues with a capacity of more than 4,000. People will need an NHS COVID pass or negative lateral flow test to enter. The new rules for nightclubs will come into force on the 15th of December. COVID passes will have to be implemented in, which have been implemented in Scotland, Wales, have caused a 30% and 26% drop off in trade, respectively, the NTI chief executive has said. And that's what I've been saying from the beginning. The clubs that are still around now, the people that are still going to nightclubs now, are definitely still in it for the love, right? Because for the most part, the general punter who just went just because they were bored on a Friday has either got new hobbies or just kind of got completely turned off from it and just stays at home and does something else, right? Or just doesn't go out in general. Most of the people. So the ones that are actually going are the ones that are there for the love. So to then implement these changes into place, you're either going to cause people to stay at home, fake whatever pass they want to get in, or, you know, whatever, or just continue doing what they're doing previously. But it's not going to make anybody kind of, I don't feel like, go out and get vaccinated at this point. Because at this point, if you don't want to get vaccinated, you've definitely got good reasons why you don't want to. And the carrot dangling of a nightclub being opened for you doesn't really entice you that much, because you've probably made some other sort of you've probably got some other options that exist. Because I know a few of promoters I have in my inbox who basically been saying, without saying, that we're not going to implement no COVID passport rule or lateral flow test rule, just come along to a party, keep it hush hush, and we'll let you in. Certain places are doing that already, so I can imagine they already exist now at this moment in time. So what an absolute shocker, man. It continues here, it says, the NTI chief executive Michael Kill said the following: vaccine passports will have a devastating impact on the sector already so bruised by the pandemic. The mixed public health messages this week have been coming out. The government have arrived at the worst possible time. The pre-Christmas period is absolutely crucial for the sector, and now it's announced damaging vaccine passports are to be implemented. Far from saving Christmas, the Prime Minister has given our sector the horrible present of more pain for businesses temporarily trying to recoup losses from the early pandemic. Now again, don't get me wrong, if I'm not mistaken, the Samarian variant wasn't discovered too recently, but still, man, the kind of lastminute.com implementation of this sort of stuff, the lack of warning, the lack of foresight, the lack of everything is just like, there's no lessons learned from the last year or so, and it just feels like we're just kind of waking up and just deciding to react to this the same way we reacted to it before. It's just like, come on, guys. The government report in June today found that vaccine passports could have effects, including discouraging people from attending venues. Of course, it concluded that the impact of bringing them in will be out of proportion to the public safety and benefits. Yes, but at this point, if you don't have one, you've probably got a good reason why you don't, and no amount of this shitty hospitality nightlife dangling in your front of your face is going to change it, because either you're going to decide to not go, or you're just going to wait it out until things get better and then go again when the rules get lax. That's what most people are going to do, because why not? It's not as if life went back to complete normal before anyway. It continues to say, given a Mr. Kill question the timing of the rationale of the government's move, it is sound evidence and based public policy making, or is it an attempt to make the news agenda on from a changing the story about a Downing Street Christmas party? Of course, which makes complete sense, and it's definitely worked. The whole Christmas party malarkey everyone was getting worried about has definitely subsided. And once again, the people in the government who are responsible for it have been able to skirt away unpunished, and us donuts, regular civilians, are the ones that are having to flipping change our plans, do this, do that, flip around here, bend over backwards just to make it work. Another one here, nightclub operator Recom, which has more than 40 venues across the UK, said it was disappointed but sadly not surprised by the government's move. Peter Marks, chairman of its UK board, said that there was no evidence anywhere in the world that nightclubs had caused an increase in COVID cases. Definitely true, and it's also only unjust to single out night night sector, but it will now have an impact on the transmission rates. Another person says Jeremy Joseph, who owns a London nightclub GAY, which is one of my favourites in heaven, said that the clubs have been really busy when they first reopened after the previous restrictions, but it has dropped in the last couple of weeks since the variants come out, of course. And it dropped anyway in general. You definitely saw it. When their first restrictions got lifted, I've said before, it definitely felt like the clubbing scene hadn't necessarily recovered or bounced back at all. The people who I saw out were the ones that were going to be out regardless, and the ones that didn't want to go out, or the ones who kind of dropped off because of the virus, because of the lockdowns, because of changing jobs, because of changing responsibilities, whatever it may be. So I'm not surprised that was the case. It says, yeah, he said his clubs had a chance to recover after previous restrictions that were lifted, but any money they made was put aside. It says here, continues the whole way through. We've been walking on eggshells because we never know what is going to happen. I feel like I'm constantly in survival mode. He said the new restrictions don't make any sense. I've got 3 venues and each is going to have different rules. It makes no sense. It's as if this government thinks that COVID will go. That venue has a capacity of 500, so I won't go in there. Exactly. If I go to GAY Bar in Old Compton Street in London, our capacity is 450. There are no restrictions, so it's just carry on as normal. Mr. Joseph said this was against the vaccine passports and that he was glad people could show lateral flow tests, so at least this won't alienate people, but you can't have one rule for one type of venue and a different rule for another. And again, that thing as well I also don't understand. I'm not for the vaccine passports at all. I only got mine because they gave me no option, but I'm not for mandated vaccinations. I don't want people going around having to show flipping papers to get into places. I think that's completely unconstitutional and against everything we stand for as a quote-unquote free society. But if you're going to enforce a rule, just do it properly. So if you're going to say vaccine passports in order to get to venues, make that a blanket rule across all venues. Don't say then you can get in with the lateral flow test also, because the lateral flow test, if you're being completely honest, can get faked, can get duped. I've never had a false positive. I've been able to take lateral flow test and not actually stick it all the way up my nose and still been able to get a negative. It's not necessarily the most accurate way of saying if you've got the virus or not. And again, like I said, they can get completely duped. So if you want to be sure that people that are entering this venue are making sure that they're not, they're vaccinated the proper way, then the best way to do it is to have them have a COVID vaccine passport. That'll be the actual way to do it, because that would mean they most likely had been double dose, whatever it may be. But this whole lateral flow test and the vaccine passport, or a vaccine passport, it just doesn't make any sense. Either you do it properly or you don't do it at all. But again, no surprise from this government that we're in. And then lastly on this topic, because again, talking about COVID can get extremely boring.
Nightclubs are to close for 4 weeks from this Friday as part of newly announced measures aimed at curbing the current rise in COVID cases.
Monkey. Bear with me 1 sec before.
Stricter social distancing measures are also on the way for...
Cool. So yeah, as you heard there, courtesy of my website thing here, doing the autoplay, which is probably one of my most biggest pet peeves when it comes to using the internet, right? Websites that have autoplay videos on articles, especially ones that have autoplay with sound. Autoplay with sound, honestly, whoever designed that needs to get pushed off the highest bridge. I really, really do believe that. But anyway, this is courtesy of France 24. It says France to close nightclubs, extend mask use in schools amid the COVID-19 surge. Again, it seems like every government from around the world, whenever they see the numbers going up in cases, they seem to panic, and the first thing they do is close nightclubs. Because essentially they believe, it's like, how many people of the population anyway? I really do think, like, let's just think about it logically. How much of the population of any city, of any country, actually goes out after 9 p.m. anyway? It's especially to a nightclub. It's a very small part of the population that goes out, those late hours and goes and gets fucked up and dances and has a good time. It's not really everybody that does this. So to suggest that they are having such a pretty kind of a devastating impact on a number of cases is a little bit foolhardily. It's a little bit dumb, isn't it? It's a little bit of a reach. Let's be honest. It's a bit of a reach. It says here, nightclubs in France. Let's get rid of that video again. Let's get on my nose. It says here, nightclubs in France will be ordered to close for 4 weeks from this weekend to counter the COVID surge, which makes sense because a few of my friends who are flipping whores for the possession parties that they put on there out there in Paris or the outskirts of Paris have gone to a few parties obviously this weekend, and I think a few that are meant to happen recently also got cancelled. I think the last ones that are going to be open I think are February and shit, so people have basically tried to squeeze in the last raise before the restrictions come into place, which again I say is counterproductive, because once you announce these things, people react 2 ways. Either they go super hard for the things that they have coming up before the restrictions change, or they stay at home. which obviously ruins the industry itself. So when it comes back up, when it's allowed to be reopened, there's no one to basically be there and rave because everyone's kind of been put off. But then also you have a surge of people coming in to kind of get the last raves in. So it's like counterproductive. It doesn't help anybody. But again, what do I know? The article says here, school children will also face stricter social distancing rules, extended use of face masks with infection rates climbing among young people, said Jean Castex, who emerged from quarantine last weekend after contracting the virus. We all have had a tendency to lower our guard in recent weeks, he said, but the government stopped short of imposing stricter measures for the general population or targeting the non-vaccinated, as several other countries have done in recent days. Instead, Castex said employers should encourage staff to work from home and urge people to ease off on social engagement such as office parties as a year end of protest. And again, man, imagine after everything we've gone through another. Last year was a shitty Christmas. This year the numbers are considerably better, of course, of like the flipping the variant virus, but we're having to go through another year of no office parties, no end of year celebrations, really, in the best way you can do it, because of course with this Omarion thing hanging over everyone's head, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, I'm just not going to celebrate anything, I'm just going to keep my head down. What a shitty way to end the year once again, which is why I've always said from the beginning, just don't, it's sad to say, but don't think too far ahead in the future. Try and enjoy whatever you can during this crazy period when you can enjoy it, and kind of live in the moment, because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. Obviously you're not guaranteed tomorrow in general, but thinking too far ahead about, I'm going to go to that festival, I'm going to go to this place holiday, no, just try and do it now. If you can go away in the next couple of weeks, go away. If you can't, don't, whatever, but don't think you're going to suddenly be able to have a normal holiday again in April, in May, in June, July, because there's no guarantees, because this government, or the world in general, the powers that be, who are basically putting us in this position where legitimately every virus that comes out, every variant that comes out, even if it's got mild symptoms and the death rate isn't that high, they're still going to enforce these draconian measures just to kind of keep us down, to keep us controlled. It's just, I'm just over it, man. I really am. But we have nothing we can do in this regard. We just have to kind of ride it out. It says here that the situation demands an individual as well as the collective effort, said Castex, but it's no longer the time for lockdowns, he said, citing the French vaccination rate is nearly 90% of the eligible population. And they're still doing the restrictions. It's like, what more can be done at this point? Clearly, we got to a point where we just have to live with it. If 90% of the people who are eligible to get the vaccination have got it, what's closing a nightclub going to do? Like, vaccinations could also extend to children from 5 to 12. Again, this nonsense with the kids. They told us before kids don't need it, and now all of a sudden kids are the vital people to get vaccinated. It's like, ay. Dancing in restaurants. Several new vaccination centres will be open in Paris over the coming days as the current sites struggle to meet demand across the major cities. Some 10 million people have already received their booster jabs. Nightclub owners reacted furiously to a new shutdown, having already been closed for most of last winter and spring before reopening in July. So they've only been open for 6 months. Brutal. Thierry Fontaine of the UMIH Noir Industry Association said clubs were being unfairly targeted. Very true. He said, once again, there's no clampdown for any other sector. They cancel New Year's Eve for us, but they'll be dancing in all the restaurants. It's very true. Very, very true. So no nightclubs are open, restaurants will be open, and for sure people are going to be having a little skank up in restaurants. They also doubted the financial aid promised by Casquettes would be enough to compensate for losing out on the key holiday seasons. Nearly all the analysed virus cases in France involving the Delta variant, which was proved more infectious even among vaccinated people. So far, France has confirmed only 25 cases of the new Omarion variant, but officials say the number could jump significantly in the coming weeks. On Sunday, the Health Ministry reported more than 42,000 cases in the previous 24 hours and more than 11,000 patients in hospital, the highest number since August, with 2,000 intensive care. So again, don't be too upset if you are wherever you are in the world, especially in the US or here in the UK, because it seems like every nation out there doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to COVID. They're all kind of overreacting, and we're just left in this kind of shit position that we're in at the moment, innit? It just is what it is. Anyway, let's move on from that one, because COVID talk is absolutely boring as hell. So this is a bit of a minor thing to talk about, but something I kind of wanted to bring about because I found it fascinatingly interesting. I've always had a real kind of bee in my bonnet, or some sort of kind of ill will to people who are hypocritical. And I know we're all kind of hypocrites in our own way. We really are. We all kind of say one thing and sometimes do the other. But I feel like sometimes, especially when you kind of get on your soapbox in terms of social justice, in terms of social issues in general, politics and whatnot, there is a level of hypocrisy that's not needed or that's not welcomed, and that also, I think, can put your whole message into disrepute. A similar to a thing can kind of be a good example I can kind of pull out from the universe could be maybe LeBron James, right? Some people would say LeBron James, he's a big advocate for social justice issues concerning marginalized communities, but then as soon as it kind of impacts his pocket, he keeps quiet. Case in point being he didn't really have nothing to say about the Chinese government's treatment of the how do you pronounce them? There's a Urigis or Urigis, however people going about that sort of stuff, right? Or maybe some of the lack of representation or the minimization representation of certain movies, and that was kind of promoted in China where certain people's faces were getting shrunk down because they didn't like the color of the skin. He kept quiet about that sort of stuff because, of course, you know, working with Nike and whatever Chinese brands that he has working out there, that was going to impact his pocket, so he kept silent that one. That one's a bit difficult to say. It's a bit of a stretch because I still do think just because you're advocating for the rights of African Americans in your country doesn't necessarily mean you have to fight for every single black person on the face of the earth or every single person that isn't white on the face of the earth. It's a bit crazy, but I do get the hypocrisy. I do understand it in that respect because he has interest in that country. Why are you not speaking up about it? You're there all the time. You have business interest there. You should be representing everybody because they're all your fans too, but he doesn't. Cool. But then the other thing that is really frustrating too, you see a lot, is this whole weird kind of women empowerment thing that happens, especially within the kind of hip hop sort of urban space with black women. And most of it, I get where it's coming from. It's coming from a real place because legitimately there has been some real heinous and horrible things that have happened in that industry, mostly concerning guys basically taking advantage of young, impressionable women in the industry and doing all sorts of nonsense to them. And because they're in a position where they can't exactly fight back, or the powers that be or the gatekeepers don't really allow them a platform or a process or a roadmap in order to kind of raise any grievances up, they kind of have to kind of swallow it all and keep quiet. But of course, you know, social media, everyone's got a platform and everyone's got an opportunity to basically say their piece without any kind of fear of repercussions, right? Or they got the support of their flipping strangers or people that have followed them, so it's a bit more easy to kind of get your message out there, speak your piece, speak truth into power, all those kind of buzzwords that people throw out there. So when people talk about female empowerment, I feel like sometimes it does come from a real place, but it also comes from an opportunistic place, because as soon as you say stuff like that, people automatically want to get behind you, rally behind you, agree with what you say, lift you up. Automatically sometimes your voice kind of has maybe more weight to it because you are representing something bigger than yourself, sort of thing, right? It's all that sort of connotations attached to it. But at the heart of it, I've always thought it's quite self-serving. It really is quite self-serving, because usually the people that say this stuff the most, especially the ones that don't prove it with action and deeds and just kind of speak about it all the time, they're usually the people who are just situational or circumstantial women's rights advocates. When it only suits their needs or when it only advances their career, they'll speak about it. If it doesn't, it puts them in an uncomfortable position, suddenly they're quiet about it. A case in point would probably be Lena Dunham. She made all sorts of excuses for one of her guy friends that was accused of some sort of assault thing. She kind of basically said the girl that was accusing him lied or something. I forgot the actual details of the case, but that was quite an egregious one. And another really egregious one that I thought was really poignant and something I wanted to speak about was the issue that happened with the Joe Budden podcast, or a kind of podcast that was on his network previously, called See the Thing Is, that was hosted by Mandii, Bridget, and a lady called Olivia. Sometime, I guess, was it last year, whenever Olivia, the third Mike girl, decided to leave See the Thing Is podcast. At the time, we didn't really know what the issue was, but then she came out and read a statement and essentially alleged or accused that Joe Budden was being completely inappropriate in terms of being a CEO or a boss of that network, in terms of how he was acting with her. And in a specific situation, when he came to be a guest on their podcast, he was throwing out really lewd remarks. I think a few of the stuff that he said, even more the stuff he got said, got cut and got edited out, but the stuff that we saw as fans already was already bad. And then I think he then went up the final straws when they went to hug, or he went to kind of hug it out with her in terms of kind of piecing up in his way, and he kind of weirdly gyrated or did some sort of motion to Olivia where she felt really violated, she didn't feel comfortable, and blah blah blah, right? But on paper, looking at it, a basically, I would say, black and white situation where you could say, hey, you were in the wrong. From what I saw, it was obviously inappropriate, you especially being her boss. She also interpreted it the wrong way. She didn't receive it well. She didn't like it whatsoever, and she didn't like what you did. So there's no like good guy or bad guy. It's just like one thing was right or the other thing was wrong. You call out the wrong person, you just keep it moving. But for whatever reason, the other two hosts of the show, See the Thing Is, Brandy and Bridget, just used it as a position or used it as opportunity to basically remind everybody they're full of shit, because they essentially excused Joe for his behavior. Didn't really chastise him in public, I didn't feel like, enough to the point where you would think, because again, I get it, he's their friend, so you're not going to throw your friend completely under the bus, but still, they essentially made excuses for Joe's actions, and essentially what you got to see from it was that obviously there were some issues that they had as females on that show where maybe they weren't the closest friends or whatever, cool. So because they didn't like this Olivia Dope girl, it was easier for them to kind of dismiss her allegations against Joe because they didn't like her, and also because they wanted to continue doing the show on Joe's network and continue in order to kind of reach their goals in terms of media and what they wanted to do, which again I thought was disgusting and pretty trashy. And this is a good example of it to kind of rehash it and kind of go back on it. I'm going to play the Olivia Dope original allegations. I'm going to play Bridget and Mandi going on the No Jumbo podcast and basically explaining why they're hypocrites and trying to make it make sense, which it doesn't. And then I'm also going to go back to a video where they're speaking about the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion situation, and Bridget is talking with a lot of spice, a lot of vim, and essentially she's of the position where we should kind of believe Megan just because she's a black woman and she suffered something, and she said she suffered something, we should believe her, which obviously whatever you want to agree on that point or not. But how she has that kind of vigor, that kind of vim for someone she doesn't know, but then when or something she doesn't know in a situation she didn't witness, but in a situation that she did witness and someone she did know in that short period of time, she was able to make all sorts of excuses for the excuses just because it seemed to marry up with her career more so. So I'm going to play all those three videos back to back, and I'm going to obviously do some closing statements on the other side. But this is Olivia Dope basically detailing some of her allegations against Joe and why she decided to leave the podcast and network.
At 14 minutes 34 seconds, there's an edit in the recording because Joe says him and I should speak more because, quote, he's been wanting to fuck me since we've met. Everyone in the studio, including production staff, laughed uncomfortably while one of my co-hosts confirmed that to be true. I am mortified by this revelation, not only because it's revealed while we are amongst the presence of all of the production staff, but it's also being done while we are also recording audio as well as visual. That scene was cut out, and it jumps to Joe repeating, we should speak more because we have the least dialogue. At 19 minutes and 26 seconds, another edit happens because Joe makes another suggestion to having sex with me. This is shown. I'm sorry. Joseph makes another suggestion to have sex with me. That scene is edited out, and what is shown in right after that is me closing my eyes, saying no, and then he says, never mind. At 21 minutes, 30 seconds, Joe tells me to hit a button, bitch, because I didn't hit a sound effect fast enough. At 24 minutes and 54 seconds, Joe makes a comment that I am throwing my singleness in his face, and he thought we were going to be a network power couple. Once again, I'm trying to laugh.
Cool. Right, and then we're going to go to the Bridget Kelly and Mandi trying to explain why they will basically side with Joe in this kind of, sexual assault incident that she's basically alleging. Come on, you gonna play or not? You gonna play or not? Oh, you go. Oh, for goodness sake, man. Bear with me a second. My computer's running super slow. As you can see, I do not have the best possible equipment on deck right now, but I'm making it work with what I have available. So please bear with me whilst I go back to the previous page. Yep, there you go. Okay, this is Bridget Kelly and Mandi speaking to Adam 22 from No Jumper about why they decided to side with Joe Budden when Olivia Dope accused him of sexual harassment at the workplace. How will they make this make sense?
That was by far like the bottom.
Did you feel like you had to choose between your friend and your identity group? Because of course, like, you as a black woman, you're expected to stand up for other black women. Like that had to be a part of like the whole decision, right? Like, you're standing by this man instead of this other black woman, right? I feel like that would be a lot of the heat you were taking.
But here's the thing in which, and she probably gonna cut me off on this because she probably don't want me to say this, but we could be women, but we ain't friends with everybody. We don't like everybody. Like, and so when we talk about, oh my God, all these rapper women should be friends and come together.
So imagine what they're saying there. I don't interrupt, but imagine what they're saying there. Essentially what they're saying is that just because they weren't friends or just because they didn't like Olivia Dope, that's why they're able to basically side with their friend in that regard. Which again, terrible thing to say. But then you can't say that when on the other side, when it came to the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion situation, they only sided with Megan because she was another black woman who they identified in terms of identity. They don't know the woman, they don't know Tory. So why would you side with her, vis-a-vis him when you weren't there? They obviously both have two conflicting views on what the situation was and what occurred. It's going to go to the courts. We're going to find out the truth, or a version of the truth, hopefully. So that's where the hypocrisy comes in, right? You want to choose your friends in one position, or you want to say you don't want to believe a woman because you're not friends with her, but on the other side you want to just jump out the window and side with somebody just because they happen to be a female that looks like you. That doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? And also it's quite disgusting too, because it means what? You won't believe a victim of sexual harassment depending on if you're friends or not with them. So if your enemy, someone you don't like, was a victim of sexual assault, what would that mean? Would that mean you would sit there and laugh? Would that mean that you'd be happy that it happened to them? How does that make any complete sense? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If anything, they should just been honest and said, hey, we were still trying to secure the bag. I just moved out here. I just left this job, or I did whatever. I wasn't about to just let everything, run off because of a little, I thought something I didn't think. Would have been honest with a better explanation. If they would have just said, we didn't think it was that big of a situation. Joe said that stuff to us all the time. That's his kind of humor. He did obviously the mark, I felt like, but at the time I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That would have been a better excuse to say than to come out there and say, oh, because we didn't like him, because we're not all friends, why should we stick up for each other? Isn't that the whole point of the female empowerment thing anyway? Isn't that the whole point of believe all black women? It doesn't mean believe all black women happen to be your friends. It's believe all black women because you're saying we need to have this collective responsibility or looking out for each other, that we can all band around each other and say, even if we have our differences, let's agree that the bigger enemy, the bigger threat are these abuser guys, not us. Even if we aren't friends, let's put our kind of differences to one side and just try and go at the person or at the group of people who are attacking us the most, who are killing us, who are raping us, all this sort of stuff. That's what you're meant to be arguing against. But again, hypocrisy at its finest.
We don't ask that of men. And at the end of the day, we're all still humans, and I rock for who I want to rock with. And there was a relationship where I had with Joe for beyond 10 years. I met Liv a week before starting the pod. And so unfortunately, where it came to, am I standing with the overall aspects of women, or am I standing with someone? Unfortunately, because again, in retrospect, maybe wasn't the best decision. However, I chose to just stand with a friend.
I think it was the best decision. But I think we made the right decision.
Terrible garbage people.
I will say that I think the part that's tough about being in the space and in the culture that we exist in is that as much as we would love to preach solidarity, as much as our audience and our demo would love to...
Shut up. Anyway, the reason why I say shut up, because look, hear this clip. This is what's going to make you see that hypocrisy is astounding. So this is a clip taken from October 2020, when they were all obviously together as a group, and they're speaking about the Tory Lanez situation and Megan Thee Stallion. I think this is just coming off when he just released his album, and obviously, Bridget is obviously not happy at the fact that he didn't read the room, and she feels like it's inappropriate considering what he's going through, blah, 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 blah. And, they have some very conflicting opinions about this situation, which they weren't even there present for. they kind of sided and decided one person's guilty, one person isn't guilty, one person's a villain, one person's a victim. But then when it comes to something they were in the room for, they were sitting there exactly in that same room and saw and heard how uncomfortable their friend was with the interaction that was going on with their boss. And supposedly she felt like she got sexually harassed and she got sexually assaulted, whatever it may be, however you view it, if you think she was exaggerating or not, somebody that's sitting next to you is meant to be your colleague, meant to be your sister, meant to be your rider, not sister, but you know what I mean, meant to be somebody you're meant to be protecting in that regard, your colleague. They felt as if like, nah, we're not going to believe you, but we're going to believe this other lady we don't even know. But hear what they have to say about that whole Tory Megan situation.
And see what happens from there.
I think that's a great idea.
It's crazy because a lot of people have definitely been talking about, of course, the Meg Thee Stallion, the Tory Lanez incident. Tory Lanez is just out here living his best life, done dropped an album, and now is shooting videos in New York City.
No, he's just out here shooting everything. Well, no one cares. Nobody asked.
Boom.
Nobody asked. Nobody cared. Yeah, it's just no one cares.
I hate too because I guess it plays back to your 5 minutes of cancel. I mean, people was really like trying to sign things to send him back to Canada, and here he is just literally walking the streets.
Well, no, I've actually seen a lot. Once he dropped that project, that 5 minutes of cancellation was over as soon as he dropped the project. It was like, oh, well, he's telling his side of the story. What? He dropped that project. First of all, let's just discuss the lack of PR and marketing that exists all across the industry.
Where is the A&R to stop these?
People have stopped reading the room. I don't know what the fuck happened. People have stopped reading the room.
There is no room.
No one reads the room. Nobody follows any sort of standard or protocol as far as what should happen socially when you drop. No, he dropped a whole entire project the day after we received the information about Breonna Taylor's case and how there were no charges for her murder.
R.I.P. Breonna Taylor.
Right? So, and fuck those guys that shot her. I'm not even gonna call them cops. I'm not even. There's no positive words, potential positive
Freedom
words
fighter,
that I am willing to grant them. Fuck those guys that killed her, and anybody that shot. That shot those wanton endangered bullets fuck them.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
So for him to drop a project,
say it,
the day after, considering what black women are already being asked to endure and converse about and accept.
The lack of awareness.
The lack of compassion
The same could be said for you.
is appalling. That to me is appalling.
The same could be said for them, no? The lack of compassion and understanding. The same could be said for them. For a colleague that sat right next to them on the same couch, they launched a podcast. So even if they weren't friends, they launched a show with them together. They had something invested in that they were both trying to strive for, to be great at, in order to kind of make a better future for themselves. And one person suffers at the hands of somebody else, somebody you meant to call a boss, a friend. You should be disappointed, right? You should be pulling that person to one side. But you shouldn't be publicly coming out and saying, oh, we're not friends and we don't have to fight for everybody. And what?
Is appalling. And
I really think, I mean, you see a lot of men, R.I.P. Breonna Taylor, everyone has been posting that. And it's because she died. So what, Meg would have had to die for y'all to see the severity of the fact that this man shot?
And again, I'm not going to play the whole thing because my computer obviously is glitching all the time, but the hypocrisy is astounding. Honestly, mind-boggling, astounding. And it just goes to show that a lot of people who basically form their entire identities around representing a particular group of people, usually, from my experience, are full of shit. Especially the ones that stand on a soapbox and speak about it all the time. The ones that are actually doing the work on the ground level, the ones that are working in local community centers, uplifting the voices of marginalized people, people that have maybe no prospects, people who basically are downtrodden, people who basically have been forgotten about. They are doing the work day to day. They don't get on social media telling you and reminding you to just hashtag doing whatever. They just show it by works and deeds. They don't go around boasting about it and talking about it, because the ones that do, once they get put in a position where they have to actually stand for something, they usually don't stand for anything. That was their test. Everyone gets that test, I think. If you are an actual social justice activist, you are out there trying to, again, represent marginalized people that are unrepresented, you usually, I feel like, get a test. You usually get tested 1 time, 2 or 3 times. It happens sometimes even when you become super religious, right? When you rededicate your life to Christ, or you go back into, you kind of rededicate your life back into Islam or flipping Judaism, whatever it may be, I would say that most likely or not, there comes a time, especially in your adult age, where your faith gets tested, right? Where your dedication gets tested, your resolution gets tested, your new way of life or your new outlook on life gets tested, and it's up to you to really pass that test or to not pass that test. And clearly they didn't. And again, I have no problem with it. You can do what you want. They're all great women, but let's not kind of make excuses for ourselves. Let's just say we decided to change the rules on ourselves, to change our criteria on how we support each other, because at that time it served our interests and our career prospects better to align ourselves with Joe Budden than it did to align ourselves with Olivia Dope. As crass and as disgusting that is the truth. But don't then turn around and say, no, we want, because that's what they think. They want both sides. They want to be able to, do their thing on their own, independent lady. We don't just go along with the sheep. We're not just here, trying to represent every single woman out there because we're doing our own thing. But on the other side, they also want the sympathy to be kind of collectively grouped in with all women, and to get all the benefits that they all get in when it comes to being unrepresented and it comes to not having a voice or not just being seen in certain places. It's like, no. Choose a lane. If you're going to be with all the toxic masculinity shit, you stand there. If you're going to be with all this, women empowerment stuff, you stand over there. But the hypocrisy is just frightening, absolutely frightening. But again, it's kind of better this way, because at least you see people's true colors. And then at least also you then can decide whether you're a business, whether you're a creative, a co-host, whatever you are. You can then decide, do I want to rock with you or not? Because they've shown you what they're about, right? They've shown you what they're about. They've shown you if the bag is big enough, they will put their morals and their ethics and their ideals to one side in order to secure their bag. If that's the case and you're okay with it, then you rock with them. But if you're not, you bounce. But then you can't complain if they then snake you. That's the thing I don't like. If you're gonna ride with a scumbag and end up snaking you, I don't want to hear you complain. But if you don't mind riding with a scumbag and hoping that doesn't go wrong for you, you can get as much good as you can at it. Because let's be honest, as much as I dislike those Bridget and Mandi girl, they did play the game pretty well. They were able to secure a pretty decent deal with Joe Budden. They were able to get all the eyes and ears of his network or his YouTube channel on their show. And I think since the show's been taken off of since they've decided to leave the Joe Budden podcast network, the views have been drastically different than what they were getting on Joe Budden podcast. So even though the views on that network weren't that great, they were still better than what they're doing on their own. So clearly Joe did something for them. He also let them keep the IP. He let them walk away, sorry, with all the intellectual property and shit. They were able to take it away and go into another platform. So it's all well and good, right? And he honoured the deal as well. He didn't snake them in the end. He probably did more right by them than he did with Rory and Mal, which is, again, goes to show how much of a dickhead Joe Budden is in that regard, right? But still, they got what they needed out of it. No problem. But let's not deny it, man. These women are flipping hypocrites, bruv. This in the worst way possible. Next on the list, we're going to talk a little bit about Succession, because I'm quite late on the boat of this. I've only jumped on it. I jumped on it only, I think, in second season when it was airing. I kind of avoided that first because when I first saw it, I just thought it'd be a bit long, drawn out, weird, boring, milquetoast sort of series. But I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly it gripped me, because of how narrow its focus was. I think that's mostly what it is. I think I like series where they're so narrow, they only talk about one side of life. They depict it from a very raw and honest POV, and you either get sunk into that world or you don't. But there's no dilly-dallying. There's no, let's represent this, no. We're going to represent one side of things only. It's sort of like The Shield. The Shield is basically your view into what a corrupt police force can look like, and how that corruption could basically infect other people who have good intentions. And they only viewed it from one POV only. The Wire was similar sort of way that way. It's all how crime basically can infest all parts of life in a city somewhere, right? From the most dilapidated area to the most rich and bougie area, everyone got touched by some level of crime and by the after effects of it. And I think Succession has done a great job of it too, because it's singularly focused on this rich family and their kind of TV broadcasting business, and how that effectively has affected the entire corporation and how it's affected other people that also kind of live within their orbit. And the finale on season 3 was just really brilliant, really brilliantly done, because it felt like everybody who'd been downtrodden, everyone that had been forgotten about, everyone who basically was on the losing side, suddenly, with the exception of course of Logan, who seems to, the only thing I'd have about it, again, I'm going to spoil some bits, so move on if you don't want to listen to it, but there's going to be some spoilers in here. The only thing I'd say that's a slight issue I have with Succession is that for whatever reason, Logan seems to always get away with it. He always seems to be successful, which again I think maybe is probably more representative of real life. So as people say, Logan Roy is sort of similar to like a Rupert Murdoch in that respect. So maybe that makes sense, because there's been so many stones and so many eggs and whatever filth thrown at Rupert Murdoch, but he's been able to keep thriving. So maybe that's a real life reflection of it. But it does feel like there needs to come a point in time where he does suffer the consequences of his actions, because they're essentially quite singularly driven, right? There's all about protecting himself and little about his family or his kids. They're all sort of kind of an afterthought, or even his employees, just mostly focused on himself. So there has to be a point in time where that can come and bite him in the ass, as it does with other characters. Every other person gets sort of like punished or humbled in a way, and Logan didn't really get punished or humbled. Yeah, he had that heart attack thing. Yeah, he had that little cheating thing where his wife kind of moved out of the home. But come on, let's be for real. Let's kind of drum it down a bit that, you know, everyone gets it in the end. But still, the end was just brilliant. Season 3 finale was just absolutely brilliant. This is an article courtesy of Variety. It says, on Succession, balls on the floor, inevitability become the tyrants they once hated, right? And I'll read quickly the article here. Of course, spoilers ahead. It says here, the moment Logan Roy, Brian Cox, realizes his children are attempting to overthrow him, he sizes them up, snarls with disdain. You bust in here, guns in hand. Great line, actually. And now you find they've turned into sausages. It's a devastating blow, made more devastating by the fact that Logan has once again somehow found his own gun where there would have been a black hole. But in the line that recalls an earlier, equally brutal Succession scene that proves equally crucial in the All Bells Say, which sees Roy kids bested by two men they never thought had it in them. In season 2, The Hunting, written by creator Jesse Armstrong and Tony Roche, directed by an especially paranoid Rogan goes on a tear during a work retreat. Convinced that there's a mole in the midst, he gets his employees drunk and berates them with hostile questions about their loyalty. Eventually, inevitably, he identifies the weaker members of the herd, hapless cousin Greg and bland lackey Carl and son-in-law Tom, and makes them balls on the floor, forcing them to oink for their sausage supper just because he says so. As Succession has shown time and time again, Logan Roy didn't become Logan Roy without first conquering a game of ball on the floor, born into a family that left his back crisscrossed with scars to this day. Logan learned from early that in order to be the best his bullies, he simply had to become the most fearsome bully of all. And thus, as Emily Vanderwerf has written for Vox, the stories of Logan Roy, his company and his children become stories of how abuse can shape and twist a person into starting the cycle all over again, just so they can get some level of control over it. Why be the scorned peasant when you can be the tyrannical king, choosing who lives to serve you and who dies trying to stop you? And that's basically what it is. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the issue that his targets most of the time are his own children. That's the thing that's so fucked up about Succession and what makes it so good. It's fair enough that he's gone through this hard childhood that's kind of conditioned him and hardened him to be this kind of tyrannical, fearsome, laser focused CEO that doesn't care about anybody else. But essentially, he's also led to him being in a place where he doesn't even care about his own kids. They're kind of an afterthought. No, there's no real love between them. It's just they're basically his employees that he kind of gives a little bit more of a leeway than he does any other person, but there's no real depth there to them. He probably treats his grandchildren better than he does his kids. When he's reading them books and stuff, you see a little bit of the softer side of him, but for the most part, they just get all snarl. It continues. Season 3 underlined the terrible potential of the boar evolving into a bully in a bold. One of the season's sharpest and hardest to watch threads saw Kieran Culkin, the Roy who may or may not have asked his family to lock him in a cage for fun as a kid, realizing how much fun it is to be a monstrous winner than a sore loser. The second Logan deigned to show him an ounce of respect, or dare he hope even affection, Roman hardened his heart to match his father's. He mirrored Logan's tone, bombastic approach, mimicking his methods and remained his graces. He positioned a true blue fascist to become the Republican Party favorite, both because he didn't care for consider the actual consequences, and because he saw a way to impress Logan with his ability to separate emotion from business. When he finally literally pushes his brother Kendall in front of the laughing crowd, even his ruthless sister Shiv can hardly believe just how completely Roman embraces the belligerent armor that his father has wielded against them. Once forced to look up at his betters, both literally and physically. Roman's stature grows in both the narrative and meticulous direction as it transforms into a man who's forcefully put him in his place, having spent most of his life belittled, dismissed, and physically battered by his own person he so desperately wants to please. Of course, Roman would jump at the chance to flip the script given a chance. And the actor that played Roman, I think I mentioned to somebody, it's like a friend. I love the fact that, again, maybe it's just a little detail that I've noticed, but for whatever reason, Roman's quite twitchy. Maybe it's like an ADHD thing they've kind of given him, but he's got that sort of like recovered drug addict sort of twitch, where he's always twitchy, always nervous, always pulling at something, always scratching his hair, tucking his shirt into his trousers imaginarily, like it's been popped out, doing weird things. But if you think about it, you don't ever see him take drugs in the entire series, apart from maybe one time, I think, when they're in a warehouse event somewhere. I don't think there's a single time where you actually see him take drugs. He drinks a lot. Most of the time he drinks and he spills out because he doesn't like it, because it's not up to his kind of standards. But you don't actually see him taking any hard drugs, really, for the most part. It's just him just kind of acting like a bit of a crackhead, which I think is perfect acting. And again, of course, he's got this weird, nervous, sarcastic, cynical tone about him consistently throughout the whole series. It's just brilliant. It works so good, that sort of ambivalence and whatever it may be. I love it all. Still, Roman's a Roy, and as such will always have a protection and higher status than the others can claim, as the bookends of the hunting and all the bells say make excruciatingly clear. The Tom Wangbanks and Gregory Hirsch of the world have to fight harder, dirtier, and craftier to get out of the floor. The entire series has led to the ultimate point of no return in All Bells Say, written by Armstrong, but season 3 laid the groundwork for Greg and Tom's betrayal with masterful precision. And again, that was probably one of the best things, because it was pretty brutal to see how Shiv treats Tom and to see how Tom gets treated by the rest of the family, which I think was basically learned behavior. I think you've seen that a lot. You've seen, if Logan Roy treats you some way in public and people see it, they usually then treat you the same way Logan Roy treats you in order to impress him. And then we saw the same thing happen with Shiv. The fair way that Shiv treats Tom like an afterthought and like a bit of a cuck is the same way everyone else treats him, because they basically see that he doesn't wear the trousers in the company or in the relationship. See, I said company. I got twang there. But then it's sick to see that for whatever reason, somehow, I don't know how it changes or what happens, because I think someone asked the director, when did they think it switched for him? But for whatever reason, something switched in Tom, where he suddenly woke up and realized that he was getting taken advantage of. Because I think usually in those real life situations, man or woman, you just end up playing your position when you can't fight back enough, or when you kept hitting a wall and you know there's nowhere to go for it. And especially if you kind of desire the things that these people desire in these sort of relationships, status, money, influence, whatever it may be, you might just think to yourself, you know what, it might be a what's that thing? Was it devil's bargain? I forgot what that term is called. But anyway, it might be a good deal to make, to kind of put my morals, my pride, my ego, my self-respect to one side, in order for me to have, again, it's sad to say, but a membership to this kind of members club, ability to go to this holiday, an ability to stay in this job, earn this salary. All these things are really important to these kind of lavishness, because that's the thing as well, the undercurrent of Succession that's really good. Think about that scandal that happened with supposedly all these sexual abuse and rapes that happened in that cruise. They've been swept under a rug. They've kind of moved on with that really, really easily. Kendall killed a kid. Like, it doesn't really matter. So we don't really see it from the perspective of the kind of, from the regular person from the outside. We see it only from the perspective of the inside people in the corporations, who only care about protecting their jobs, who only care about protecting their holiday homes, making sure their kids are able to go to private schools, keeping up appearances, making sure they can, get into buildings, have a car pick them up. That's what they care about. They don't actually care about the morals, the ethics, the kind of the basically the pain that whole process of basically run people through. They basically let people go, give them money to go away somewhere, hide, whatever it may be, but there's no real life consequences for that kind of heinous stuff that they do. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're all trying to protect their own jobs. They don't really care about doing right by these victims. Even, what's his name? Kendall's the same thing. It's not as if he's trying to expose his family and basically get his dad fired or maybe put in prison because he's a good guy. He's only doing it because he wants to be the boss. He wants to be the face of the new company, wherever it may be. So that's essentially what position they're in. And I think that's where they do really well in Succession. They never ever show you the other side. They never show you the point of view from the protesters outside the building of Waystar. No one really gives a shit, right? They're just kind of muffled sounds in the background. They're just telling you what's actually going on in the boardroom, at boardroom level, what these guys and girls actually saying, and how they're actually dealing with this real life consequences. They don't. They just kind of move on and skip it over. It continues here. It says, Bonded as brothers in the Roy adjacent arms, Tom and Greg took all the family's abuse until they could find their way above it. But in the Roy's grand tradition, abuse isn't a tunnel but a cycle. Both Tom and Greg had outs, a divorce, a golden parachute. True, exactly. Tom could have left the divorce, Greg could have got that golden parachute, but again they turned it down if they truly wanted to take them. Instead, they doubled down, bet the house, and shocked the whole out of everyone but themselves. There's no such thing as an everyman or Succession, so Tom and Greg are about as close as it gets. McFadden and Brune are the tallest men in the cast. Oh, true, very true. I didn't realize that. And yet the show continuously portrays them as constantly cowering, capitulating. It's a very good point. In front of the other figuratively demanding Roys, Tom folds himself to fit Shiv's needs. Greg's stature becomes a joke in and of itself. The moments when directors let them stand up and straight and truly look down on a Roy, as McFadden does so effectively in the diner parking lot to raise a skeptical eyebrow at Kendall, are as rare as they are purposely jarring. Tom and Greg are both close enough to the Roys without being considered part of the family, and when they allow themselves to feel the weight of their ambition, they are more formidable than they even know. Crucially, Tom and Greg also formed the show's most steadfast alliance early on. What began as a weird taunting banter became something more during hunting, when Tom chose not to expose Greg and joined him on the floor for everyone else to mock and dismiss as a useless nothing. Exactly. Since then, they have been the closest this show has to true blue brothers, keeping each other safe as bigger power players blustered above their heads. And again, I've always kind of loved, that's why I think I kind of love Greg as well, because he's kind of the proverbial I'm not meant to be here but I'm going to act like it person. He's gone through so many crises of confidence, so many kind of imposter syndrome moments, but he's kind of steadfastly held on, and he's obviously adopted the mannerisms of the rich and the elites, right? Which obviously shows you it's a learned sort of behavior, right? You could easily become one of the elites or one of the 1%ers as soon as you get put around them and you start seeing all the trappings and the kind of gifts and rewards you get given for just merely standing around these people. And he obviously worked out a way to do it. And again, with having no real, family name or legacy or reputation to come with, just kind of a loose connection to the family, he's been able to make the most of it, and you can't deny that. And of course, Tom got completely cucked out by his wife and Shiv, especially in front of the family. They probably know what she gets up to in her private time, and he still was able to kind of withdraw and endure, one of those things, and basically see out the other side. It continues here, says that Shiv refused to take Tom seriously and Kendall took Greg for granted. Both did their best to get up every time they were kicked down, and every time one did, they found the other extending a helping hand. It was Greg who told Tom about Shiv's cheating in season 1, and Tom who covered for Greg in season 2. It was Tom who did his best to keep Greg out of jail when both of them seemed primed for their sacrificial slaughter, and Greg who enthusiastically joined Tom's team minutes after Shiv shrugs him off as an afterthought. Seeing the two of them shake hands in the finale, thus cutting the Roy's kids off at the knees, recalls the episode's early warning words from the tech giant Matson, who said, "Here two plebs recognize a kindred spirit in the other and work together to bring down the oblivious masters who assumed that they were harmless." Very true. Never take your opponent for granted, isn't it? I think what's her name, Amanda Nunes, obviously learned that lesson over the weekend against Lima. To end it here, said Tom and Gregor's victory isn't yet complete, as Tom told Greg while enticing him to make a deal with the devil. They're now in a solid position at the top of the bottom, but the Roy's, Logan included, would be better to pay more attention to the boars on the floor who are more incentive than any one blindsided careless tyrant. And honestly, that scene where Tom comes back in and you see the door ajar and Shiv notices how nicely his dad kind of embraces him, she realizes right then that okay, he's the one that betrayed me, but she can't be mad either because again, she took the piss out of him for the entirety of the relationship, so she knows what the deal is, isn't it? She knows what the deal is. And again, Succession's fucking amazing. If you haven't watched it already, please do check it out. Great series. Again, I was somebody that wasn't necessarily sold on it to begin with. I was one of the doubters, one of the haters, and I've definitely come around to it over the last couple of months. I've definitely come around to it. What next to talk about here briefly? Let's talk about this actually. Let's move on this one. So it looks like the Crocs by Salehe Bembury have finally been released in the US, I think on his site, and I think they're going to come out later on other stores sometime tomorrow. I know they're going to come out on End Clothing, I think tomorrow. I've got a launches slot I put in for them, so hopefully I'll get a pair, but I'm probably going to doubt that. But this is definitely the consequence of rampant sneaker culture or rampant resale culture, this kind of engineered scarcity that exists in the sneaker industry, and just the general disregard for the actual customers has led to us to be in a place where, for whatever reason, a pair of Crocs are reselling at the moment in my size, which is a US 11, for £634. Now, the last sale, of course, was at $484. So I'm sure if you wanted to get a pair under 500, you could. But imagine paying under £500 for a pair of Crocs. Just imagine. Retail price of these things is anywhere between 50 to 100. I think the retail price for these are about 110 or 80. I forgot the price that's on end. But they're going for £600 plus on StockX. This, of course, like I said, is a consequence of this horrible practice that's been put in place at the moment. This kind of mind control that brands like Nike and obviously their sneakers app has on us in terms of sneakerheads, where we are under the impression that somehow we are being done a favor by having the opportunity to put in a raffle in order to buy a shoe with our hard-earned money, right? That whole weird mindfuck that goes on, that kind of convinces us that they can't make as many shoes as they can to satisfy demand, because then it wouldn't be limited. But they still would be, because not everyone wants to buy these shits anyway. No general punter is going to want to buy a pair of Salehe Bembury Crocs anyway. They're only for a specific group of people. And if, let's say, there's about 2,000, let's say there's 2 million sneakers in the world, let's say there's 10 million sneakers in the world, you're telling me they couldn't satisfy demand by putting out enough of these shoes so that they don't have to be resold for this amount? Again, I have no problem with resellers. My entire university time in university was funded by reselling, right? I was able to queue up at stores like Slamming Kicks, for Patrol, a few other places, and buy shoes and then be able to resell them in order for me to kind of pay my way through uni, because I had no job, because I had no experience on my CV, no one to hire me. So the only way I could make some money was by reselling shoes. So I have no problem with reselling shoes, but it's the fact that we're in a industry or in a sector where for whatever reason they've convinced us as customers that they can't just make more. You can get an iPhone, you can buy a flat screen TV, you can buy a Balenciaga jacket, whatever you want. You can buy those things to your heart's content. Even if they're limited, you can end up getting them if you want to. But for some reason, if an MX comes out that's collaborated with a particular kind of brand, a particular store, suddenly, if you're not there at the time when it releases on the sneakers app to put your raffle ticket in or put your entry in to get a raffle ticket, suddenly you can't get them. Or suddenly a store gets them and they backdoor them to somebody else. Like, it's just all a nonsense. They've created this toxic environment, and already we've seen the consequences of it. We saw that kid recently in America who basically was using his mum's company card, who actually works for Nike, to fleece more shoes under her discount and then resell them whatever platform he was doing it in. Pure greed. But again, it's born from the conditions that these guys have basically operated in. And these other brands are doing the same thing. New Balance are following suit. Adidas are following suit. They're just making these shoes purposely scarce. Just for what? Because there's already, like I said, let's imagine this whole kind of engineered scarcity existed back in the day when I was collecting shoes. That makes more sense because there's not a lot of us anyway, right? And you're legitimately maybe having to, it's maybe costing you more money to make a pair of Tier 0 Air Force Ones and have a different box for them for friends and family than it would be just to kind of make them general and release them. I get it. But you're servicing this need of this small niche. But then when sneaker culture becomes mainstream and it now becomes like a general thing that most kids do, most kids in colleges probably have resold a shoe before. They probably know what a Yeezy is. They know what collaboration is. They probably read Hypebeast all the time. They're on Sneaker Kicks. They're on Nice Kicks. They're on Sneaker Freaker. They know these platforms. It's like a standard thing now. There's no kid in the world, I don't think, under the age of 15 that doesn't know what a limited edition shoe is. Maybe they don't care about it or don't have the money to buy it, but they know that they exist. And there's no probably adult, I think, over the age of 20 who maybe lives in a metropolitan city that also doesn't know about limited edition shoes. Maybe they don't want to buy them, they can't afford them, but they know that they exist. That's the case. And most people, I would assume, have some sort of inkling of what a kind of limited edition sneaker looks like, what a sneaker they like looks like, what something they don't like. I mean, they have a kind of a good taste level. If that's the case, service them. Allow them to buy the shoes. Why can't we buy them? Why can I get a Tesla, but I can't get a flipping pair of limited edition Nikes? How does that make any sense? Why is that thing more limited than the other thing? And why is it still limited when everyone wears them? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. And again, it doesn't cheapen it, because it's not as if, like, never in my life have I seen more than 10 people wear the shoe that I have in one day. Never. No, even if it's a Yeezy, a 350. I've never seen more than 10 people wear one shoe that I have in one day. Never. Maybe over the span of a week, of course. But even if you live in flipping Bond Street, you're never going to go out on a one day wearing your Sakai LD waffles and see 10 people wearing the exact same waffle that you have. Maybe different colorways, but the exact same colorway. It's not going to happen. Because everyone wears different shit every day. Not everyone is wearing the fucking same sneakers all the time. Especially if you're a sneakerhead, you're probably going to be wearing different shoes every day anyway. So it's very unlikely that you're suddenly going to bump into somebody who's got the same Year of the Dog Air Force Ones that you have. It doesn't make any sense. So again, they just do this because they just want to create hype. They want to create all this commotion online, get clicks, whatever it may be. And then at the end of it, look what ends up happening. Not many people actually get a chance to actually wear them because they're so busy, preoccupied, trying to buy them to sell them at these kind of crazy prices. But then we know what's going to happen. Once they release in Europe and they come out, the prices are probably going to level out and they're probably going to go down anyway. Let's see if I refresh the screen. This is a bit earlier on. Let's see if they've kind of decreased, have gone up. It's gone up to $499. I've seen their last sale. So one was $484. So now they've gone up to $499. Okay, so it's gone down already. Right, it was already $600. Now you can buy a pair already at $390. So it means that as the hours are progressing, and now the other stores in Europe are going to get them later on, sometime today, or sometime on the 15th, or later on, maybe in the 16th, the price is definitely going to change from there. So it's already changed drastically. So now you're going to have a bunch of people who are going to stockpile a pair of these Crocs in an effort to try and resell them. They're going to be left with them dead stock, or they're going to be left with dead stock because no one's going to want them at that exorbitant prices. And it's just going to be the same cycle again and again and again. They create this unnecessary nonsense. They really do. And it really grinds my gears. I can't describe to you how annoying this whole bullshit is. It's so fucking frustrating. Because again, it doesn't service anybody but their own needs. No one wins from this. No one wins. The sneaker companies don't win. The brand doesn't win. The people that actually want to wear them day to day don't win. The only thing that's good about this sort of stuff, I think, from it, although it's still the same price, $650. The only thing that's good from this I can see is that if you actually do want them, and you don't mind paying the money, platforms like StockX, like Go, and other places, and maybe even eBay, they kind of concentrate effort in terms of having a kind of concentrated sneakers thing. They exist because you're able, if you got the money, to buy them. So if you got the cash and you don't mind buying them, and you got a bank card, you can enter your details and boom, it get shipped to you. That's great. Because beforehand, you had to go on Facebook groups, you had to buy them on forums, message boards and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It was a bit of a dodgy place to be in because, you know, who knew if this person was going to send it to you or not. Even if you did an invoice thing and you claimed the money later, it was still a bit of a dance. But at least now you can actually go through the process, and even if you miss them and you're not bothered about waking up in the night and doing that shit, you can still get them if you want later on. But this is a nonsense, bruv. This is legitimately a nonsense. This is where we're at, where you're paying, you know, resale price on these Crocs is what? It's the same as some designer shoe. Are you having a laugh? You could buy a pair of Rick Owens for a pair of these. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what does this make any sense of? Maybe you can tell me the Rick Owens is more valuable. It's like, no, it isn't. It's a Croc. It's a shoe that you're going to add to your rotation. It's not going to be the main shoe in your rotation at all. And here it is being sold for double the money because they want to create this flipping artificial scarcity in the hopes of doing what? Again, it's not as if you're creating more sneakerheads off the back of this. If you're a sneakerhead, you're a sneakerhead now because you want to be. You're not going to be a sneakerhead because suddenly now these Crocs are limited edition. It's not going to be a vibe for you. I'd imagine so anyway, but anyway, what do I know, man? Well, I don't know. What do I care? If they get released from flipping China factory, I'll probably just buy them anyway. In that way, I'm not gonna be that bothered about it anymore because, you know, they've done kind of occupying my time and occupying my mind, bro. It's all just nonsense with these guys. Absolute nonsense. What else? I think that might be it. You know, before I jump off, because I've got to do another thing regarding what else I wanted to talk about. Was that one? Yeah, I think that might be it. Maybe that is it. How long have we spoken already? Don't want to waste too much more of your time. Let's see. Yeah, it's been an hour 20. Let's leave it there. So it's Agostinho Show episode number what? What'd I say? I said 628, I think, right? 62 or 528. One of them, 528s. If you listen via the podcast app, you'll hear a tune to end everything. If you're watching via YouTube, it will just end right there. Boom, bang, bang. Of course, support the show via Patreon, do all that good stuff. A bonus episode coming end of the week. And of course, loads of other things coming end of the week too. Hopefully, going to do a DJ mix soon on the weekend. So definitely keep an eye out for that. I need to replace the glasses. As you can tell, I lost the other ones because I left them in the other place I was in. Standard me. You know the deal. And then, yeah, I'll see you guys again on the other side. But yeah, if you listen to the podcast, you hear a song. If you're watching the video, you won't see or hear nothing. But thanks again for tuning into the show. It's been a pleasure to have your company. I'll see you guys again soon. Take care. Peace.